My name is Ashley Rose Young, and I'm an American History Curator in the Rare Book Division at the Library of Congress. I am going to very, very briefly introduce our wonderful artists, and then I'm going to turn things over to them. So for all of us who were here for Jessica C. White's talk earlier this afternoon, you know that she is a studio artist in Asheville, North Carolina, where she prints books, or where she makes prints, books, and crankies. And you'll learn even more about those whimsical hand-crank scrolls in just a moment. Jessica is joined here today by Kevin Kehrberg, who is a musicologist, bassist, and professor of music at Warren Wilson College, and Jeffrey A. Keith, who is a writer, a musician, and a professor of history, also at Warren Wilson College. These three scholars and artists have performed together many, many times, breathing life into the folk traditions of Appalachia and beyond. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. Welcome to the stage, and I'm getting off.
Thanks again, Ashley, for that great introduction. Thank everybody for coming back. And if you're here for the first time, you're in for a real treat. What we are going to do is show you some of the crankies that I just talked about, which are my evolution as a book artist of what, for me, is a book structure. We have crankies set to song, and a lot of them are going to be played by Kevin and Jeff. What I'm going to do is kick us off with this one called The Calling. I think we can see it up on the screen right now. It is about a little character called City Squirrel. By the way, I'm showing you these in sort of a chronological format. So you're seeing my evolution as a cranky artist. We're starting with my first one and moving through to the most recent one. So let's kick it off with City Squirrel. So here we have little City Squirrel. He's just minding his own business, but he hears something calling. He doesn't quite know what it is, but he's going to follow it. So he goes running off. He's running through the suburbs. Past the farm. And it turns out that it was the mountains that were calling him the whole time. That's a little quote by John Muir to his sister in a letter back in the 1800s. Naturalist and philosopher John Muir, who most notably wrote a lot about the mountains that he lived in. Thank you. So that was a really quick, short introduction to what a cranky is. And like I've said before, it is essentially just a scroll in a box. That one was 5 feet long, and this one is about the same, maybe just a little bit longer. They are all carved from linoleum blocks and printed. This one, let me set this up just a little bit. It's called Bio Bay. And, this last one was a song called Squirrel Hunters, a traditional folk song called Squirrel Hunters. This one, we're going to hear a song called Moon Glow by Will Hudson and Irving Mills. And this is about a kayaking trip that I made through a bioluminescent bay in Puerto Rico, which they called Bio Bay. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen bioluminescence, but it's basically like these organisms that live in the water that light up with their own bioluminescence when they're agitated. Now, a lot of photographs you see, it looks like the water is kind of glowing. But when I went and saw this in person, it's really interesting that you can actually see each tiny microscopic organism light up with its own light. So when you brush your hand through the water, it looks like the stars are lighting up. And at one point during this trip, we had to travel kayaking through a mangrove forest, a dark mangrove forest, and it opened up into a bay, and I picked up some water in my hands, and they sparkled, and it really looked like I was holding stars in my hand. This is set to some text, is a poem by Sean Scott Smith, and he was my partner in this trip as well. All right. We live in hope, we search for more. We mourn our losses, but in the end we live. A perfect tale, a perfect line, a tale of friendship. A reasonable journey told with extraordinary circumstances. Into the black, wherever the tall ship takes us. First star to the right. You may have noticed that at the end of each of these is something called a colophon, and that again is a bookish tradition of telling a little bit more about the story, how it was printed, how it was written, some provenance of maybe the text and the paper. And so you'll see that in a lot of artist books and fine press books is the colophon at the end. So my next one is called Moon-Eyed People. This is the one that's most like a storybook kind of feeling to it, because I actually wrote some text that comes along with these images that tells the story of an old Cherokee legend called the Moon-Eyed People. And it is about a group of people who lived in the Appalachian Mountains long before the Cherokee actually arrived. Now, the story that I'm telling is not the actual Cherokee legend itself, but it's actually an interpretation and the collection of the story by European settlers that came in the 1700s and what they wrote about what they learned from the Cherokees. And this is going to be set to a song called Margaret's Waltz. According to Cherokee legend, there once was a race of pale-skinned people who lived in the Appalachian Mountains long before the white settlers arrived. Their eyes were sensitive to sunlight, and so they often came out at night, gazing at the soft light of the moon. The Cherokee drove them away and settled in these misty mountains. Stories emerged that they were the descendants of Prince Madoc of Wales, who traveled to the New World and settled here long before the other Europeans arrived. Colonizers searched for this tribe of white Indians for evidence of their claim to this land and to their inherent supremacy. Speculations proliferated, but no evidence was ever found. Botanist Benjamin Smith Barton in 1797 suggested that they are related to the Guna people who live in the place that we now call Panama. They have a high rate of albinism, people with pearly pale skin and eyes that are sensitive to bright light. They are the keepers of a special responsibility to defend the moon against a dragon who tries to eat it during a lunar eclipse, shooting it down with their bows and arrows. According to Guna legend, they have this pale skin because their mothers were irresistibly drawn to the moon while she was pregnant. They are called the children of the moon. So along with these little stories that I was telling, I have shifted into a kind of a different way of creating Crankies, and it was thanks to a friend of mine who introduced me to a local Asheville singer-songwriter. And we met, and our mutual friend suggested that we do a collaboration together. And I showed, this is my friend Tyler Ramsey I'm talking about. I showed him one of my Crankies, and he was like, oh, you know what? I have a new song coming out that maybe could lend itself to this Cranky structure. And so this is the first time I created a Cranky actually set to music. So thanks to Kevin and Jeff for bringing some life to these Crankies by playing some background music. But this is the first one where the story itself is told in the song. And I listened to the song as I created the imagery for the Cranky. And so there's a little bit of a backstory to this that I want to tell you about. It is set to the song called Flare by Neil Casale by Tyler Ramsey, and is actually based on a real event. So Tyler was out at the beach one day, and while he was out on the beach, he saw a flare shoot up out in the middle of the ocean, and it really worried him that there was somebody out there in a boat in such distress that they had to send up a flare. And so he went back to his hotel room and called for help, called the police for help, and just let them know that that's what he saw. Well, after that, there was really nothing else he could do but just sit and wait. There's no way of knowing if anything actually happened. And so during that time, while he was sitting in his hotel room waiting and wondering and worrying, he wrote this song. And so when I was listening to it, I decided to sort of start off by telling the story visually as the narrator, as the person out on the beach, and you'll see we're sort of following along with it. But then I go into some metaphors where we're sinking down into the deep, dark ocean, and it ends with us as the viewer alone in a sinking boat. And so for me and Tyler in this work that we're doing, we kind of want to send out a reminder to people who do sink into this deep, dark kind of despair of a place, just a reminder that there is help available, and all you have to do is just send up a flare to ask for the help. For this song, I am going to play Tyler's song on a record that I brought with me.
I'm in trouble, help me please. Send someone to save me. On the beach, a gathered crowd. Everyone was looking now, dazzled by the colored clouds. Somebody swim to me.
For the next Cranky, this is the one I talked briefly about in my talk earlier, where I was inspired instead of by a song, by an article that I read that was published online in The Bitter Southerner, written by Jeff Keith and Kevin Kehrberg here, who did the research for this work. I was really kind of blown away by the story behind the song. It's called Swannanoa Tunnel, and inspired to illustrate the story that basically Kevin and Jeff painted in this article in a way that we could show it in a Cranky while playing the song as well. And what I'm going to do is let the two of them tell you more about this song.
Thank you, Jessica, and both for the introduction and for this beautiful rendering of some of Kevin's and my research into Swannanoa. And thank you very much to the Library of Congress. We've had an amazing experience here. We're so happy to be here. We're so honored and humbled. It's amazing. Thank you very much, Ashley, and everyone else. But we just can't believe about this experience, and everyone in the rare book divisions has been fantastic. Jessica, Kevin, and I all live in Swannanoa. It's an unincorporated mountain town. It's a community, really, and most Americans haven't heard of it. That said, we're, the town itself is next to Asheville, North Carolina, which many people have heard of, and Black Mountain, which we were talking about Black Mountain College in Stephanie's introductory comments today. But most people around us, if they're joking, they like to call Swannanoa Swananowhere. And it's really actually somewhere. And the word Swannanoa itself is actually an English corruption of a Cherokee term, Suwali Nunahi. And if you've heard of Swannanoa, though, lately, it's usually because we were the epicenter of the damage from and really destruction from Hurricane Helene in 2024. The three of us ended up in Swannanoa to be at Warren Wilson College, which is a wonderful little work college and a local liberal arts school. Historically, Swannanoa was known for the nearby Swannanoa Gap, so something, a feature in the natural landscape. And it was a critical passageway, and it's the location now of a very important and significant railroad tunnel. It's just recently reopened after that storm. This railroad tunnel was opened in 1879, the Swannanoa Tunnel, and for several years, Kevin and I have been researching the story behind a particular folk song that emerged from this construction effort.
Thanks, Jeff, and please let me echo Jessica and Jeff's gratitude. It really is an honor for us to be here and celebrate the American landscape as part of America 250. Such a treat. Thank you. So the folk song at the center of our research is known as Swannanoa Tunnel. It's also called Asheville Junction. Jeff and I actually learned it as a bluegrass song when we were both living in Kentucky, before we even knew where Swannanoa was on a map. It's part of traditional music. The song's text references a tunnel collapsing on a passing train and recounts that people died. So naturally, he and I assumed that Swannanoa Tunnel was a typical disaster song, which is a category of folk music popular in the early 20th century that commemorates historic tragedies or incidents. When we both ended up in Swannanoa teaching at Warren Wilson, we decided to explore the song's history as part of a class we were co-teaching at the time. And so we did a class presentation, but what began as a class presentation has become a project that's now 14 years running. So.
Kevin and I began to read primary historical documents about this tunnel and about this song, and it really changed our understanding of the song substantially. We learned that the construction of the Western North Carolina Railroad, including the Swannanoa Tunnel, had been a long-term economic and social disaster after decades of failure due to the forbidding Blue Ridge Mountain escarpment and all kinds of economic mismanagement. The state of North Carolina purchased the Western North Carolina Railroad. Congressional reports exposed us to a critical change that coincided with the purchase, and that was that the state began to use imprisoned laborers to build the railroad and its tunnels. Congressional reports celebrated the economic efficiency of this arrangement, while the same reports also noted that scores of workers were dying due to the work itself. These incarcerated workers completed the final and longest tunnel, the Swannanoa Tunnel, like I said earlier, in 1879. The vast majority of them, mostly men, but there were some women, were African-American prisoners, and most of them had been convicted of questionable charges, and some certainly were given inflated sentences of hard labor. They worked, in other words, at gunpoint and experienced excruciating working conditions. One anecdote is an example of some of the difficulties. In 1879, the tunnel's construction was running behind schedule, and the governor was someone named Zebulon Vance, had been born near Asheville, and he wanted to blow the first train whistle on the other side of the tunnel in his home county. Since it wasn't complete, the incarcerated men were made to drag a 17-ton train over the Swannanoa Gap. When Vance finally blew the whistle, newspapers celebrated him for bringing the railroad to the high country of North Carolina. In truth, the train had been brought there by the black men who dragged it over a mountain. Reading stories such as these, we came to see the song Swannanoa Tunnel in a completely new light.
Indeed. So it became clear to us that this song had originated as a work song, not a disaster song. And work songs are an example of another type of folk music used in the context of a work site, often to maintain rhythm for a task and to pass the time. However, none of the recorded versions we could find resembled a work song. Most dated to the mid-20th century and were recorded during the folk revival, a period in the 1950s and 60s when these young commercial folk groups would achieve success with these catchy arrangements of traditional folk songs, and Swannanoa Tunnel was among them. And even early field recordings of the song, some of which we heard for the first time this morning. Shout out to the American Folk Life Center for helping us with that project. Some research this morning. Yes, thank you. Amazing staff there too. They still sounded like a folk ballad. And all the recordings that we could find up to that point had been recorded by white musicians, which was also a surprise. We experienced a breakthrough when we discovered in a discography of recordings by African-American musicians reference a 1930s field recording of Asheville Junction by a man listed as Will Shorty Love. So Love had been recorded by Frank Brown, a notable folklorist from Duke University, and Brown's notes indicated that Love was a janitor at the school. We tracked the recording down, and it was stunning. Unlike every other recording, Love sang Swannanoa Tunnel with the cadence of a work song. There was no banjo or guitar accompaniment. Rather, his recording featured him singing a cappella with these loud, rhythmic accents that mimic the sound of hammer blows. And this was a telltale sign of a hammer song, which is sort of a subcategory of work songs that were connected with railroad construction that emerged in the late 19th century.
At that point, we decided to write about what we were learning, and this is where Jessica came across this in the Bitter Southerner online. It's a magazine where we could include all kinds of images and recordings, and our editor there, Josina Guess, had a great idea. She's like, you should go find some of Will Love's descendants. And we said, absolutely. And we located an amazing woman named Clarice Thorpe, who's since passed. She was Love's granddaughter. And she lived in Durham, North Carolina. When we visited Ms. Thorpe, we played Love's recording, which she had never heard. And she regaled us with all kinds of stories about her beloved grandpapa, as she called him. And while Ms. Thorpe didn't have a sense of where he would have learned this song, what was important was that her stories completely transformed our understanding of Love. Rather than being a janitor, it turns out that Love had delivered campus mail. He had broken the color line in doing so, and he was a leader in his community. He always wore a suit, and he loved his family. Most strikingly, Thorpe and other family members who met with us said they'd never heard the name Shorty. So just as our understanding of the folk song changed, our understanding of the folkloric record also shifted. And our article, which is called Somebody Died, Babe, that's one of the lyrics, remains accessible online. And we're now writing a book about this. So we were thrilled when Jessica approached us about creating a Crankie to depict the story that we tell in the article. So we're going to pass it back to her. So thanks a lot.
All right, so by the way, I want to let everyone know that if you're interested in reading more, there's just so much more to this than what they're telling you in these few minutes. And if you're interested, the link to an article, the article is on the display table out there, so you can take a quick clip of it on your way out. I do want to mention that this is very much rooted in place, in the place where we live right now. And so the Crankie, the images that I use are also very much rooted in place, which makes a lot of sense to an Asheville audience. A lot of people would recognize exactly what they're seeing. But if you're not from that area, you might not notice. And so I just want to let you know a few unusual things you might see. For instance, there's a cast iron sculpture in downtown Asheville. It is literally an iron like you would press clothes with, but it's gigantic, and it's where a lot of buskers tend to hang out in downtown Asheville. You would always see live music down there. And then as we move out of downtown Asheville, we'll see the Asheville skyline, and then we're going to move through a tunnel. Now, this is not the tunnel that this song is about. This is just a tunnel that we drive through the mountain as we're leaving Asheville, heading into Swannanoa and Black Mountain. So you're kind of leaving Asheville. And in this Crankie, I'm showing us moving through space, but also through time. After we leave this tunnel, we're moving backwards in time, and there are some iconic Asheville landmarks from the early 1900s, including a sign for the Mountaineer Inn, which is still standing today. And then we move towards Black Mountain, and we're getting closer and closer to where the tunnels actually exist. And you'll see the Black Mountain Train Depot, which also still stands today, but it's a historic site. It's no longer a train depot. All right, are we ready to kick it off? Okay, let's go for it.
Asheville Junction, Swannanoa Tunnel, all kids in, babe, all kids in. Last December, I remember, wind blows cold, babe, wind blows cold.
Somebody's round, babe, somebody's round. Asheville Junction, Swannanoa Tunnel. It's all caved in, babe, it's all caved in. When you hear that hoot-owl squalling, somebody died, babe, somebody died. Swannanoa Tunnel, it's all caved in, babe, it's all caved in. I'm going back to that Swannanoa Tunnel. That's my home, that's my home.
And you hear my what the hell is somebody's round, babe, somebody's round. When you hear that hoot-owl squall, somebody's died, somebody's dead. I got back to Swannanoa Tunnel, that's my home.
for the last Cranky I have for you today, this is a brand new Cranky that I just started on a couple months ago, kind of sketching out. I actually didn't have plans to show this here today because I didn't think I would have it finished in time. And it is another song by my friend Tyler Ramsey. He just put out a new album back in January, and so it's one of my favorite songs from this album. And it is called Flying Things, and it is a song that is kind of full of joy and hope, and I really I needed it at a time, and so I listened to it a lot. And so what happened was one day while I was listening to it, I heard the news of the Artemis II crew taking off and flying around the moon and back. And I remember this term that people talked about, moon joy. And so it got me really excited to include the Artemis crew in my Cranky full of flying and full of joy. And so when it comes to the symposium, I was thinking about the theme of coming together here and celebrating American 250 years of America, and thinking about the hopefulness that we can see ahead. I wanted to rush through and kind of finish this Cranky because I really wanted to bring it here today and end the show with this Cranky. So because it is a little bit rushed through, what I'm showing you is not actually the finished Cranky. This is not something I usually do because I don't usually show work in progress. But what I've done is taken all of my drawings and put them in a Cranky box. And what you're seeing is actually the preliminary drawings that I'm going to then use to then make the print. So this is not a printed Cranky. I should mention too, just because I think it's a little bit funny, that there are a few points where I wanted to add some color because it just needed a little bit of color, and then I added a little bit more color, and then I added a little bit more color, and I was up pretty late last night because I couldn't stop coloring. So the whole thing is like all color now. So for this one, I'm going to also play this record, Flying Things by Tyler Ramsey.
Above the branches of the trees, we're all flying things. We're resting in their arms among the leaves. The moon is full tonight, but all these clouds came rolling and they're blocking out the sky. Darling, it's alright. We've traveled through the darkest clouds to reach the other side. Now we're all here together and there are wings for us to ride. We're all flying things. We'll fly over these mountains to the sea. We're all flying things. Come meet me by the ocean in your dream. Baby, get your wings and meet me by the ocean in your flying dream. And I'd do anything to hold you and protect you from the trouble life can bring. I'll send all my love with you in the songs that I will sing. And all the dreams you carry, I will carry them with me. resting in their arms among the leaves. We're all flying things. We'll fly over these mountains to the sea. We're all flying things. Come meet me by the ocean in your dream.
Thank you so much. I think we might have some time for some questions. Yeah, if anyone would like to ask a question. Got one over here.
Hi. Do you storyboard the whole thing before you start? And then also, how much do the images and story change during your process?
I do. I create a storyboard usually in an accordion folded book because it's easier to carry around. So it's like a long scrap of paper, and then I fold it up because scrolls are kind of hard to carry around, so I can take it with me and work on it in different places. And it's also easy to like cut pieces out and add things in. And so when I storyboard, there's tons of sketches, and there's a lot of moving pieces. The one thing that I've noticed when I'm storyboarding is that I think I'm making a cranky that's about 10 feet long, and then it's about 12 feet long, and then there's another section that I need to add more, and it's, before you know, it's 15 feet long, and then now here, this was supposed to be like a little 10-foot long one, and it's about 20 feet long. Like, they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Along those same lines, though, this, like I said, this is preliminary drawings, and so the final one probably will change from here, too. So as I work, I sort of change my mind, and, you never know when something like astronauts flying to the moon might suddenly happen and inspire you, so there might be new things that get inserted in during this next year while I work on this.
Along those same lines, you have crankies of different sizes. How do you determine what's the proper size for a particular story?
Yeah, so when I first started making these, I went with about this size with the calling. This felt manageable to me, and one of the reasons is because I have an 11-year-old son. So I had a baby, I had a full-time job, and everything I made just had to get smaller. And so I could carve about this much and this size and make a full-size cranky. Now I have a little bit more time. He's getting older. He keeps himself busy. I have a little more time. So I went a little bit larger. And I thought that for a while, all of my crankies were going to go larger because then I started performing, and I wanted to have these larger performance crankies. Suddenly, I've gone smaller again, and that's because I have been carving linoleum for a while for some of these crankies, and I actually really miss working small with those wood engravings. And so I am thinking, it sounds a little bit insane, but I am thinking about making this one as all wood engravings. It might take a while. So that's why I'm going a little bit smaller, and then I can get into those really fine details, like the little hairs of a bumblebee. I could pull out more in a wood engraving than I could with a large linoleum.
I actually have a question for Jeff and Kevin.
Yeah, come on up, you guys. Let's bring them back.
I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about the class that you were teaching and the class that you are teaching at Warren Wilson that has to do with the Swannanoa Tunnel. And tell me all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Great to see you. Yes, so Warren Wilson College is a federally designated work college. There are, I think, 9 now in the country. And so what that means is that all the students have a work requirement as part of their degree program. And this runs the gamut. We have a working farm. We also have a bunch of craft studios, woodworking, blacksmithing, fiber arts. But then students do things you would expect, work in the dining hall. But they also come to your office and fix your phone if it's broken. But anyway, so we wanted to explore, as a music professor, I was trying to think of new classes, new exciting classes And we were interested in co-teaching, and so we were talking one day about exploring the intersection of music and work and the way that that manifests itself, particularly in southern Appalachia. And so we started thinking about that topic a lot and came up with these sort of 3 segments of the class. And one of the segments was basically music and work, the way music is used to accompany work. And so railroad construction became a big sort of focus of the class, and looking at songs that had to do with railroad building. And then we also looked at music and labor, sort of the labor movement and the music that came out of that, especially in North Carolina with the textile industry. There was a pretty significant unionization movement that produced a lot of labor songs that were really important, and some fascinating stories there. And then our last segment was basically music as work. So just looking literally at a lot of the country music that came out of North Carolina from those textile mills and professional performers. So that's a little bit of it, but yes, with the railroad segment, and we looked at some other industries too, coal mining, for example. We read a great book called Steel Driving Man, The Untold Story of John Henry. And it's an incredible book by a historian that basically unpacks the song John Henry. And Scott Reynolds Nelson is the author. Thank you, Jeff. And it really encapsulates a methodology that I like to use as a musicologist called a song profile, where you basically take a song that has great significance in culture and follow its trajectory and life cycle over time. So, do you want to say anything?
I'll only add that Swannanoa was once called Blanket Town. We were the home to the largest blanket factory in the world. And it's now unfortunately been burnt down. There was an arson, but that was in the early 2000s. But this was a really interesting opportunity for us to dig into local music and local culture. And just since we were shouting out the Folklore Center, I wanted to celebrate that the night watchman at the Beacon Mill was a guy named Marcus Martin, who was a great fiddler. And fiddle geeks love Marcus Martin. And he performed all kinds of great fiddle tunes, some of which were thankfully recorded by Alan Lomax and are here in this building. So we're so thankful for all that.
I just want to say, too, I love listening to them fall down these rabbit holes and tell me about the songs. And they're like fascinating stories, and that's what got me into this. But we are talking about some follow-up ones because I also want to learn more about this, too. So, yeah, it's really interesting stuff, yeah.
I have a question. I'm so fascinated by, I study street cries in my own work, and so I'm very interested in work songs. But as I think of the 3 of you as artists collaborating together and bringing a material form in this beautiful Crankie to the ephemerality of music, how do you actually time the movement of the Crankie to the music? I know some people with a music background might say like, oh, I have to have sheet music in front of me, or I need to have some sort of score that's guiding me along. But Jessica, I'm kind of curious to know how you've internalized that rhythm of the song and how you worked together to make that happen.
Yeah, so in the article that I read, like Jeff alluded to earlier, there are links to a lot of different versions of this song. And I got to listen to all of them, including this Will Love recording too. And so what I did was I storyboarded out some ideas. And for me, it was important not just to illustrate a song like I have with some of the other Crankies I've done, but to illustrate the story behind the song. So I try to come up with ideas of how to incorporate these 2 different, sort of like almost represented as 2 different time periods of how the song has existed in 2 different times. And I took that idea to them and was like, what do you guys think? Is this telling the story that you want to tell? So I wanted them to really give me feedback on whether I was actually, in some ways my Crankie is like playing the supporting role for what their work is.
I see it the other way around, but anyway. Yeah, so when we got together, I remember a discussion about, well, it would be really cool to sort of thread together, the Will Love recording, because it was such a breakthrough for us, but also kind of incorporate a contemporary performance that is informed by our knowledge of just learning this music over the last 20, 25 years. And so we sort of had this notion of starting with this field recording, this archival work, and then kind of migrating into live music, and then coming back to that. And so that came together. But there's definitely an aspect of it that is, I think, as musicians, it's great having this monitor here, because we can kind of see where things are, and so we can make adjustments as necessary. And so there's some of that going on too, to get to your point about like how we time it. I feel like the music allows us places where we can be flexible and maybe stretch something a little bit here or compress it there, and so that helps too.
I only want to add something that's not directly related, and that's just when you can get to where you have multimedia, but it's all feels very like connected to a place and where you are, and it's very tactile. It's a wonderful experience, and we were even having this last night as Jessica showed her hand already, so I can share that she's like over there, like coloring, like up on this bar, and we're practicing our tunes and having this conversation about how one medium sits there to be observed and the other is immediately gone unless you're at the Library of Congress and is forever somewhere. But anyway, but the thing is that is such a wonderful tension and sort of play between the approaches, and we're just having a great time with it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh.
So I loved your music, and I can't help but think of the parallels between the Swannanoa story and the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, early 2000s. It's like exactly what you're describing of African Americans after Civil War Reconstruction, being really falsely imprisoned and forced into manual labor, and that being the spark for these popular song recordings, when recording music was first available. I feel like it's a good example of really early cultural appropriation. How does your institutional work lay out the background or the context like that?
Well, I guess a place to start is that when we began all of this, it was truly, as we described it earlier, that it was in a class, and we thought, oh, this will be so wonderful. We'll quickly be able to give this presentation on this song that name checks our town. It didn't take long to find the congressional records, and that there had been some good scholarship that I want to make very clear, and also there had been some excellent both nonfiction and fiction. Wilma Dykeman's The French Broad references this really intensely, and there was a book called The Road that's a fiction, and we were just like, okay, this is a much larger story, but we felt that the song allowed us to grab onto something that allowed people to have discussions. And so we made a point of bringing this into conversation with our community. We've gone to community arts groups, schools, churches, very importantly, and across the color line. I mean, Asheville's a wonderful progressive place, but it's pretty segregated. So started making friends with different black preachers and asking them if we could share this work. We actually found, as I mentioned before, Clarice Thorpe was amazing, and we had some real help from the Duke University Library because they had repatriated some of the recordings, which is the kind of term of art here, where people will take the recordings and put them back into the families or the communities from which that music was recorded or taken. Choosing of language here is really important. So the repatriation effort had happened, but this recording had been misfiled, so it had not gotten back. So it was kind of an amazing fluke that we had this piece in all of our questions when we met with Ms. Thorpe. But I would emphasize that more happened. We started to wonder why we couldn't find specific names of people who had been incarcerated and done this work. And we started to work with our state Congress people and got a loosening, a liberalizing of access to records, and then we were able to have names. And then we found a descendant of some workers, and then we went to the local church there and played music. And so we're trying to share it out that way so that it's sort of a process, in this case, of something different than just, I'm not saying just, something different than repatriation, something about sort of reintroducing the song and seeing what happens. We were thrilled one day when we opened the New York Times, and the article was mentioned by Rhiannon Giddens, who, if you're not familiar, is a wonderful banjo player and MacArthur Award winner. She's won several incredible awards, earned in a lot of different genres, including opera, Omar, which is an incredible piece. But she then said, I want to do something about the American Railroad, and she became the artistic director of the Silk Road Ensemble, and she did a whole bunch of work around the railroad, and this was a centerpiece of it, and it happened to be released on the day of Helene, when many people in our home community died, and our whole town was wrecked. And, you know, she was then shining a light on that and bringing a different kind of repair to our broken community. And so there's beauty to be seen in this, and we want to celebrate that beauty. But there's so much pain that we're very careful in how we carry it. Last night we were having conversations about words, like we want to use this word, not that word, you know, and trying to figure out the best approach, and we're never going to get it right. The only thing I'll add beyond that, and Kevin could elaborate if he wants, or Jessica, if you want to go for it and talk about music in this way, but the presence of so many work songs that specifically pertain to the distinct and experience of Jim Crow South and false and incorrect incarceration. We try to be very careful about how we talk about that too, is astounding. Because when we got this list of people who were at the tunnel, we saw that many of them were charged with larceny, which is very flexible, especially in the context of the Jim Crow South. And so that becomes a very sad layer of the story. But to be clear, this song is one of many, of a giant genre, and it's changed how I think about the music, and yet it still is that beautiful sound, right, that moves me and has shaped so much of my life for decades. And so thinking that through with Kevin has been really enlightening, but just as much, I think our thinking it through with a community has been pretty amazing for the creativity it's spawned, and also further questions, because we have more and more songs like this that people come up to us and are working on.
Yeah, that sums it up very well. Thank you. No,
Can I say one thing about?
Yeah, please do.
Something that's really important that Jeff has kind of touched on is the humanizing of this story. That we know the story of the convict laborers, and it's sort of an abstract idea, I think, for a lot of us. For my Crankie, when I first planned it out, I wanted to have the ghostly image of the convict laborers passing behind the railroad, and originally they were going to be carved in linoleum, just like everything else was, and it was just going to be my carvings of those images. And I realized it just didn't have the right, there's something like off about it. It just didn't quite look right. And so when I put the actual photograph in place, it all made sense. Like, it put like real faces to the stories that we've heard, and I feel like that's a really important part of this, is to remember that these are real people that we're talking about.
Right,
yeah, absolutely. And you know, we teach students who, Warren Wilson is a college that students come to. We have a great traditional music program, so we have students that come there to play banjo and play fiddle and study with some of the great musicians in the area. But I think another thing that motivates us is trying to get across to these students that, hey, listen, you really need to think about the music you play. because they're playing, old songs, and sometimes they don't know the stories behind them. And we didn't know the story behind one, and it was a sobering experience to learn it. And so sort of walking them through what that looks like really kind of, creates some pretty cool aha moments for them too.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more quick one.
Hi, my name is Althea Hayden. I just want to ask you, I'm sure that Elizabeth Cotton's Freight Train must be part of your curriculum and maybe part of your repertoire?
Well, we have a lot of students that love to play it, I can tell you that much. Yeah.
All right, I just want to know, because she has such a, interesting way of playing the guitar.
Of course, definitely.
And she got a Grammy when she was 9 years old, but she wrote the song when she was a teenager, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, she was, the first person to really become interested in her playing was Mike Seeger. Right. So, thank you so much for that. Yeah, no, she's a popular, everyone loves that song and wants to play it, so that would be a great example where, I would try to get a student to dig deeper. I mean, don't just learn Freight Train, right? Like, who was Elizabeth Cotton? She worked as a domestic worker, for this folklorist's family. Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
I really love that you're bringing this up, because sitting in my studio is a sketch of a cranky of a freight train, and each car is a little vignette of Elizabeth Cotton's life story. It's been sitting there, I've been working on it for a few years, and it's let's talk. I love her story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
All right, I think with that, we're going to need to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you one more time to our amazing speakers and performers.